Okay, welcome to what's actually the first of our sort of video interviews with key figures in the industry on the buyer. And so very welcome Jason Haynes, who's the co-owner of Flint Wine. So how are you, Jason? You all right?
Yeah, very well. Busy, but very well. Yeah.
Yeah, no, nice to see you. And so, I mean, we can get stuck into the whole the last 10 weeks of our lives shortly, but I just thought, just to set the scene really for people who may not necessarily know Flint Wines in the whole, could you just give us a sort of an overview of the business and also kind of where you were at the beginning of the year, if you can remember that far, before we actually went into all this?
Yeah, well, a very brief history. So we've been going since '06. Two of us started out, myself and Sam Clark. Named ourselves after Sam's dog at the time.
All right.
Seemed like a good idea. Then Gareth Devaney, the master sommelier, he joined us in 2010, and we really started to develop the trade side, on and off trade side of the business from then onwards, really. And yeah, we do a lot of work with restaurants, particularly in London, but all over the UK now.
Yeah.
And then also a lot of shops and regional merchants and some of the bigger merchants. As we've expanded our range, so we've been able to offer something quite interesting for them, I think. And business has been really good. Over the last 3 years, we've doubled turnover, which is great. So very happy there. Hopefully made a little bit of money somewhere along the line. And then obviously our big thing is really since day one's been Burgundy, because that's what we love, that's what we know, that's where our contacts are. We've moved into California a little bit, and then in the last 2 years we've really developed the Italian side quite a lot. We see quite a lot of similarities between people who like Burgundy and people who like Nebbiolo, and what's happening in Piedmont seems to be a little bit like what was happening in Burgundy, say 10 years ago. So there are three core areas. And then, business in the last year has been interesting. I would say 2019 the figures were okay, but I think we all had to work a little bit harder to maintain them. Restaurants were perhaps a little quieter than they had been, but we have a good team, and Gareth is well connected, and that the figures in the end look pretty good. But I just got the impression, funnily enough, that post general election there was just going to be a little bit more certainty and a little bit more positivity coming into 2020, and then bang, this virus happened. So we never really found out whether that was the case or not.
But looking at what you do though, because obviously you have the private client side of things, and you've also got the online wine division, don't you, as well? You have the Stannery Wine Group that you run.
Stannery Wine, that's right. Yeah.
So I mean, in terms of kind of that whole multi-channel not having all your eggs in one basket, as it were. I mean, is that something which clearly has benefited you over this time, or how has it actually played out?
Yeah, I think it has helped. In many ways, it's helped for a while because, to a certain degree, being Burgundy specialists, we're quite vintage dependent.
Yeah.
So a really great vintage can certainly play its part on the level of sales, but obviously if restaurants go a little bit quieter, then perhaps we have the off-trade to pull up a little bit. We've invested quite a lot on the Stannery side over the last year, both in terms of personnel and with the new website coming on board. Sadly, it was not quite on board in time for the lockdown. The whole point of the Stannery thing was really to differentiate between the retail side and the professional trade side, if you like. I think as we continue to trade, we'll probably see the two lists slightly divulging, that's the right word, and just become a little bit more separate. But certainly both the off-trade and the retail side have been absolutely crucial since lockdown. We understandably the restaurant trade was perhaps 2 weeks before the official lockdown was already getting a little bit quieter.
Of course,
obviously, it just cut.
What is your mix then normally between on and off trade between the two sides of the business?
That's actually it's probably about a third of each of the three sectors, which is extraordinary.
2/3 going to some extent.
Yeah. So obviously in theory, we've just lost a third of the business. But I say both the other two sides of the business have stepped up, and the figures year on year, we're just got another month at the end of our financial year. We should remarkably end up ahead of last year, which is
crikey.
Which I would say would be a good result given.
I think you'd be one of the rare companies that can say that at the moment, which is great.
Yeah, well, we've had nice growth over the last 3 years, as I say, but we had fairly ambitious targets again for this year. So obviously we probably won't quite reach those targets, but if we can have grown by probably be around 15%, something like that overall, I think we have to take that as a real positive.
You mentioned the retail there, so obviously that's working with the more specialist wine trade, is it? In terms of who when you say retail, what do you mean by retail?
Well, I suppose our private customers really. But we, because we have a lot of agencies both in California now, or America, and Burgundy, the amount of business we do with regional merchants has really grown enormously, and I think they've been, for us to have done well the last 2 or 3 months. I mean, they've been absolutely crucial. Even though some of the actual bricks and mortar, some of the shops that we deal with, haven't been able to open themselves, they've done amazing business, either online or over the phone, delivery inspections, that sort of thing. We've all seen the figures. I don't know if they're still valid, but the ones that came out a few weeks ago that said retail sales of wine were about 30% up this year, which proves that we're a nation full of alcoholics.
Yeah.
Nothing else, but so it's good that the off trade's done so nicely, and I'm pleased some of the shops have been rewarded for all their hard work.
And have you been able to benefit? You mentioned the website, your own online side of things was sort of like there or thereabouts. Have you been able to see that spike in sales online as well? Well,
so just before the lockdown, we took the decision to invest in a new site. So we actually shut down the old one, and we're waiting for the new one to come up. So we have a temporary page there. So in a way, it's a little frustrating, but we console ourselves with knowing that what's coming is going to be all singing, all dancing.
Potentially that wave there's been to move online, particularly the private clients, and as you say, with the strength of the independents over the last couple of months, means that actually if you're able to come back with a strong online offer down the line, it's certainly, okay, you may have lost the sales now, but it's something which you can potentially benefit from longer term.
Yeah, I think I really hope, and I hope we see this in the food industry as well. I think what the independents have done, the way they've managed to adapt their business generally has been fantastic, and I hope that the new customers that they've all got on board over the last 3 months stay with them and don't go back to the supermarkets, really. You see that with food suppliers. I mean, there's been some brilliant companies that are, delivering meat and vegetables, all those sorts of things to home. And I've never eaten as well as I have over the last 3 months. And I really hope that people remember that. and they support their local shops and continue to buy their wine there from the people who really looked after them in an extraordinary time.
Yeah, I mean, it just seemed quite a lot of the figures you see from people like Kantar and CGA, Nielsen. They're all these sort of longer term trends around delivery in particular, and people wanting to have that, or woken up to the concept of convenience of delivery seems to be something which will stay with us, further down the line, which I guess is going to change a lot of the way people retail in the future.
I think so, very, very much. I mean, obviously, going forward, we're not all going to be at home as much as we have been, which has made accepting deliveries very easy.
Yeah.
Especially the things that you wouldn't want sitting in the sunshine outside. But, again, I think that they'll be able to adapt when we're perhaps back in offices and things like that. But yeah, no, I think it's been really good. I think the wine trade's shown a lot of modernity and a lot of improvisation in its willingness and ability to adapt really, really quickly. I think it's...
As a business, what have you had to do as a company in terms of how you work with your staff, and have you been able to keep people working, or what's the situation there?
Pretty much, we shut down the office about a week before lockdown officially. Really, just because it felt like the right thing to do. I always think you don't necessarily need to be told by the government what you should be doing. Use your brain occasionally.
The common sense, yes.
Yeah. So we sent. Let me just. We sent everyone home on the previous Monday. They were all set up to access their emails, look at the stock system.
Okay.
In place. Thankfully, we invested in Bevica about 4 or 5 months ago, so everyone was set up with that at home. Had regular phone conversations, got involved with Zoom quite a lot. And actually, people adapted to it really well, and many of us found ourselves working much more efficiently than we had been previously. I think an office environment is great for sharing ideas and having a feel for all elements of the business, and particularly if we're someone trying to manage a business, that's really important. Yeah. But at the same time, I think being able to really focus and concentrate and get things done, sitting at home without being disturbed is fantastic. So I think we've all achieved, probably, caught up with all those things that we've been putting off for weeks and weeks, and hopefully all our inboxes are a little bit emptier than they were pre-lockdown.
Yeah, I suppose also you kind of appreciate, how much the wine trade, we do travel, don't we? Or going to tastings, and how much of our week is actually out of the office, not necessarily doing the exact thing we want to be doing. We're just sort of getting ourselves to do somewhere, or coming back from somewhere. Whereas all that time is now in our hands now.
Yeah, exactly. I would normally have been out, I think, probably had 2 or 3 weeks in Burgundy in April and maybe early May. I was there briefly at the end of January, which is a bit too early to taste. So obviously, I haven't been able to do that.
So from the buying side, then, I mean, just in terms of, obviously there's the efficiencies, but has there been sort of a downside at all in terms of being able to taste and be able to talk to producers and having that kind of hands-on feel, or have you been able to work around that as well?
Certainly, keeping in touch with producers has been fine. They're actually really busy at the moment as well. It's especially in Burgundy where it's so warm. They're weeks ahead of where they would normally be, and actually getting hold of them is the tricky part, because they're out in the vineyards doing all the work they need to be doing. Having also just maybe done something with the red wines, done the bottling and everything. So yeah, that's been a big part of my day, is really just odd phone calls, emails, just keeping them up to date with where we're at. When the lockdown came, I just emailed all the suppliers to say, we're all good, we're here, this is what we're doing. We might pick up wines a couple of months later than usual. Just wanted to sort of see what the lockdown was going to look like. Obviously, we had no idea what it was going to entail when it began. But actually, in that sense, we've been reordering our everyday wines. Some of the rosés. we sold more Trienne rosé from south of France than we did this time last year, which is extraordinary. So we've had to be with emergency orders of that coming over. Obviously, tasting hasn't been possible, but it's not the big tasting season anyway. Certainly in Burgundy, I would generally spend 6 weeks there in October and November, so that's fine. This is more of a keeping an eye on it, getting to know the vintage, but not making any big decisions. Italy is the same as well. That tends to happen a bit later, and we have Filippo, who's in charge of the Italian wines, and Sam, who looks after the American wines. Well, he's actually been in America, but the wrong part of America during lockdown. So that hasn't been an issue. But I think keeping in touch with growers, reassuring them, just making sure they can plan. So because they've got to organise their teams as well, whether it's in the vineyards or in the cellars or getting orders ready. And the shippers have been great. They've been working as normal.
Okay. Because there was a concern, wasn't there, at the beginning when everybody in Europe was in lockdown before us about whether we actually could get the wine out of the key countries. But that all seems to have worked with a little bit of delay here and there. But that seems to have worked okay.
Exactly. A few days because of isolation issues, I think, in logistical areas. But I'd like to say a big thank you, I think, to LCB. They've been terrific. They've managed to keep enough of their team on board, and their service has been excellent. So we've been able to get deliveries to people who've needed them. They've accepted shipments almost as quickly as they would normally. Got the information out very quickly. So where we've needed to, we've been able to turn things around very quickly. So hats off to Alf and his team. I think they've done a really terrific job, actually.
Yeah, it's just something I hear time and again, everybody talking about that. It's almost the point where, if LCB weren't as efficient as they have been, the rest of the trade would really have struggled to be able to cope or keep up with any of this demand we've had.
Well, I think if LCB had had to shut down, we've done a lot less business. We can still sell wines to be stored in bond, to be drunk later on, but in terms of getting wine to people to drink now, it would have been impossible. So we don't have our own separate warehouse. Everything is at LCB, so we're very, very reliant on them. And there were a couple of weeks where we weren't sure, whether it was feasible for them to stay open. So we were very grateful that they could.
And the other big move for yourselves during the lockdown is you've actually managed to do some business as well. You've managed to. Can you talk us through the domain direct deal, or what's happened there?
Yeah, to be fair, if you'd said to me, on the first day of lockdown, by the end of the end of lockdown, you had bought another company, I think I'd have laughed at you. But we had one or two discussions about possibility of perhaps buying domain direct. But we haven't really taken discussions too much further than that. But then obviously Hillary sadly passed away in March, and the deal came back on the table, really. As I say, slightly unexpected. We had a quick think about it. Did we? Was it the right time to be doing something like that? Is there ever a perfect time? I'm not so sure. There's
Yeah.
always something that you could put up as an excuse. So we said, look, the reasons for wanting to buy it haven't really changed. So, very respected company with some great suppliers and some great customers. So, as I say, we thought about it for a bit, but not for too long.
Well, I guess it really cements your Burgundy profile even more in terms of what you have.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. In some ways, you think the beauty of putting two companies together is that they're perhaps completely different, and they each bring something different to the table. In many ways, there are a lot of similarities. We both had a similar client base. We were both very Burgundy oriented, and you think, well, okay, maybe that's doubling the yoke or whatever the phrase is. But when we looked a bit more closely at it, their list is very strong in the Côte de Beaune. We're probably a little bit stronger in the Côte de Nuits. So actually, there was a lot less crossover than one might have expected.
Okay.
And most of our white wine producers, we can't get enough stock. We're continually running out. Partly because they make such good wines, and hopefully partly because we're doing a good job selling them. So being able to beef up a supply of good quality producers is great. And obviously they got some world-renowned domains, in amongst them. So
So how will it work in perhaps? Is it too early to say? I mean, will it be run completely as Flint, or will it still keep its trading name, or how will that work?
Well, certainly the Domain Direct website will stay up and running for now. We want people to know that obviously that it's still there in many respects, and all the people that were working at Domain Direct still will come over to us.
Okay.
The name's harder to say because obviously we've already got two companies, if you like. So whether we need three is open question. I suppose what we're very wary of is really keeping the spirit of the company alive. I mean, we've said to both producers and customers, and that if anything, out of respect for Hillary, we want to keep the same philosophy going, which is very similar to ours. I think she bought wines because she loved them. She'd been working with some of the growers since day one, so 39 years. The amount of respect that I've seen in correspondence from growers back to the family when they heard the sad news is amazing. So yeah, we certainly have a responsibility to not let her down, and I think just really by evolving the business and developing it alongside ours, or as part of our business, that's probably more important than the name in many ways.
Well, it certainly feels like a right fit. When you're looking in from the outside, it seems as though you're both kind of, as you say, made for each other to some extent in terms of how it can evolve. So.
Yeah, well, they say they got. She had some growers there that we've always loved and would have always loved to have worked with. So hopefully we can do that. And we shouldn't forget as well the Lewin estate that they have in Australia that Hillary had been working with, I think, for about 30 years. One of the top Australian estates. And there's Spotswood as well, which fit really nicely into our Californian range. So yeah, it feels like a jigsaw that fits quite well, actually.
Okay. Can I just ask, whilst we're talking about range, I mean, are there other parts of the world? Because I know you mentioned at the beginning there, you've expanded more into Italy and California, and I know you've built up a bit more profile in the New World as well. I mean, so do you still see areas of where you want to try and improve your range or enhance it in certain countries or regions, or is there
It's a difficult one. We we do next to nothing in countries like Spain, where obviously there's some great wines being produced and there's big demand for. The question we always ask ourselves is, could we do it as well as someone who's already doing it?
Yeah.
We don't really want to do it in a very average way. When we looked at Italy about 3 years ago, we've been working with LVO Cogno in Barolo for 2 or 3 years, and that was going very well. And we were just deciding, do we want to expand Italy? Do we want to take it further? And then the opportunity came with Hector Scaluna wanted to ex-H&H Bancroft. He was one of the H's of that. He'd then gone on his own and done HS wines, and he was really looking for a home really for what he called his children, i.e. all his producers, because he was looking to retire. And again, that came about just at the right time. We were in that say we either do Italy or we don't. Yeah. Suddenly we got the chance to work with people like Luca Aragna, Monte Rossi, the Gorellis family, or Bottazzini, and some fantastic names like that. And it kind of made up our mind for us. And it just meant that we could do it properly. And as a result of that, we then went out and found other producers.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you said. I remember doing a debate actually with LiveX a few months ago, where they were saying that the secondary market for Italian wine has really taken off over the last sort of 3 or 4 years. Perhaps in respect to some of the pricing from Bordeaux and Burgundy, it seems to be a very good time to be working with very good Italian producers at the moment.
Yeah, I think we've been lucky there. Someone like Luca Aragna in Piedmont, his wines now, there's a huge demand for them, and they have become quite inflationary, just as you say, in the last 2 or 3 years. And he's a lot of fun, and he enjoys eating a lot of truffles, which is great when you go out there. But and the wines of Cogno in Italy, in Piedmont as well. He's been making good wines for a long time, but it's just suddenly, again, the last 3 or 4 years, the interest in them has been extraordinary. And as you say, they probably, with where Bordeaux and then subsequently Burgundy went price-wise, suddenly made some of these Italian wines look great value.
Was that? Yeah.
And actually, even though they have moved already a bit in price, they're still looking pretty value. You're getting single vineyard Barolos and Barbarescos for not much more than village Burgundy on occasions. So, no, we've been lucky there. The things we've moved into seem to have become quite fashionable at just the right time. So long may it last. Yeah.
Can I just switch tack a little bit, look forward really into where we're going to go next? How do you see the on-trade and the opportunities, or just how do you get a picture for how things might return from the on-trade side of things and how long that might take? Yeah, well,
we had a discussion, as you may have seen, with 1 or 2 restaurateurs last week about what the future might look like. The key thing that came out of that was the 2-meter rule.
Yeah.
That would be completely unsustainable.
Yeah.
Having the difference between 1 meter and 2 meter is probably the difference between a restaurant opening and closing.
Yeah.
Or you just can't get the capacity otherwise. The thing we just don't know, and we won't know until everyone goes back to work, is whether people will go to restaurants with the same enthusiasm that they used to. I mean, I think we all want to go back to restaurants. Yeah, anyone who loves food and wine, we're itching to go back and eat good food and drink good wine. But it's those people who perhaps go out once a fortnight, or not people like us who are maybe going out 2 or 3 times a week, who will perhaps make a real difference, because there's an awful lot of them. And will they just be not too afraid, but will their work habits have changed?
Will they be in the city?
If everyone's only going to the office 3 days a week, not 5, because I really think working from home will continue for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Does that mean lunchtime restaurants are not going to work as well as they used to? So I just don't know. I think until we see a good smattering of restaurants opening, we really won't know. I certainly think neighbourhood restaurants are going to be well placed.
Yeah.
I think there'll be a lot of loyalty towards them. I think the idea of just being
local as well.
Able to wander up the road. You don't need to get in a cab. Don't need to get on the tube.
Yeah.
All those things.
Particularly while working from home more as well. You're at home, but you may feel like you want to support people in your own local communities, don't you?
Yeah, I think some of the really big what you would say bustly, but slightly places without character, I suppose. Just generic chains. I do wonder how they'll work. Would you want to be into somewhere that's serving sort of fairly average food?
I suppose you have a slight advantage in terms of like being able to assess the overall picture, because obviously you've got your own stake in Cubus restaurant, haven't you? So, I mean, what are your thoughts there? I mean, in terms of how have you had a chance to even start thinking about how you might have to redesign that, or is it too early to say?
There's a couple of private rooms upstairs, which I think could be very helpful in terms of being able to segregate people, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
We've always said the kitchens are going to be an interesting environment, because those 2 or 3 hours during service, it's stressful. It won't always be easy to keep that distance, I'm sure. Cubus is interesting because it's not a restaurant that opens at the weekend, because it's based in the city. So lunchtime business is very important. If people don't go back to offices, that's, you would think, going to have an impact there. At the same time, because of where it is in the city, people still do business over lunch. So it might be one of the restaurants that does still work well at lunchtime. And then in the evening, generally it does really good business in the evening, perhaps less so on a Friday night, because people tend to disappear for the weekend. But the other 4 evenings are really good. I think that will be key.
What's the thoughts on wine lists and actual pricing? Because I know CGA have done some work where a lot of the restaurants, and particularly perhaps more the sort of pub area, where they're talking about having smaller lists both for food and for wine, and a lot more focused about. Is that something which you can see happening as well? More focused, smaller lists as opposed to the big volumes of stock and holding and all the rest of it?
I think certainly for restaurants in the short to medium term, cash flow is going to be absolutely crucial. We know a lot of restaurants operate on being able to survive for only a certain amount of time. Cash flow is absolutely key. So just reducing your number of both food and wine offerings seems a logical thing to do. Yeah. I don't think the public would have a problem with that. I'd like to think they would rather have a choice of 3 fantastic main courses and the restaurant still be open, than have 6 and it having to shut because it can't operate like that.
Yeah.
So I can easily see a more restricted menu. And then as regards the wine list, maybe a more I mean, there's already been a trend to lots of wines by the glass anyway, so I guess that will probably continue. But I think, yeah, in the very short term, keeping things tight and I mean, if I was opening a new restaurant tomorrow, or not tomorrow, but say in September, I think a short food menu and just a really ever-changing wine list with 40, 50 wines would work really well.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the idea also that people in the on-trade, some of the senior players are talking about this idea of a relaunch rather than a reopen, and actually, you know, okay, we all have all these social distancing rules and we're going to have all these potentially negative aspects, but potentially for restaurants to re-emerge as a new experience. So the same way that we're having to go shopping in a different way, you know, when we go and eat out, and actually try and use that as a way to be a point of difference. So I suppose it could be quite an interesting time to see what innovations and changes we do see from restaurants in the months to come.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying something new. We're trying something new in about 3 weeks' time. We're doing a dinner with a winemaker who's going to be stuck out in Maurice Saint-Denis in Burgundy.
All right.
The aim is we'll have everyone delivered the same food by a chef.
Okay.
All the wines will be 67. They're kindly going to put together little kits of all the wines, so we'll get those all organised in advance.
All right.
We have 4 flights of 4 different wines, so 16 wines. Everyone's going to be drinking the same thing at the same time, and in Zoom you can put people into little breakout rooms, and we'll treat those as if it's your own table.
Oh, right. What a great idea.
You have a table of 4, so a bit like we're a table of 2 here.
Okay.
And then every half an hour we'll bring everyone back and we'll talk about the wines and see what people think.
Fantastic idea.
Might be awful.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've heard of there's been so much innovation on online tasting, but that's definitely the most interesting I've heard in terms of like how you just described that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I think let's see if it works. I mean, I'm not saying it's the future of restaurants, but we'll organise a blind wine for the middle of the event, so each table can compete against the other tables, have a little chat on their own, and again come back to the main room. And so, yeah, I think innovation can do all sorts of things. I've talked about before, you know, being able to order your food on the way to a restaurant.
Yeah.
Either in a taxi or I've always wondered why people have never done that on a riverboat.
Yeah.
People coming up to say somewhere like Pont-Tour on the river, you start out in Richmond, get on the riverboat, taxi, have a glass of champagne, type in your food order, and you get there, and it's all done really.
Yeah, fair enough.
So things like that, you know, so there would need to be less interaction with the staff once you're at the restaurant.
Yeah.
It's going to be difficult to get that balance between still having a great experience, which is why you go out partly, and being safe and comfortable and feeling, you know, happy to spend money and spend time there.
But as you say, that opportunity there is for restaurants to actually think about themselves having an in-restaurant experience, but also having a out-of-restaurant or in your home experience with that restaurant. You know, you actually, that could be quite interesting to see how that develops. So you obviously had to learn. You know, I saw you last week doing that. You know, very very impressed how you managed to get Jason Atherton to appear on a Zoom debate. He
was very good actually. Yeah. Was,
so you're learning your chat show routine as well.
Sadly, there's a long way to go yet, but it was a good panel, and it was interesting just to have different perspectives, because we're all going to, you know, whether you're a supplier, a sommelier, a restaurateur, a chef, a waiter, you're all going to have your concerns, but you're all going to be coming at it from a slightly different angle.
Yeah,
And,
that's great. Oh, it's interesting. I think it's been fascinating actually how the trade, as you said earlier, have adapted to this and trying different things and new skills, and it's been really quite inspiring. I mean, can I ask you, just sort of like coming towards near the end of our chat? I mean, as a business owner and as a sort of a leader of a team, how have you found it in terms of trying to manage a team from your front room, I suppose?
Yeah. Well, like everyone else, who've been nosing around everyone else's houses when they've been on Zoom. But I think in many ways it's about trusting them to take responsibility and for what they're doing. Really, I think we don't, we can have a chat once a week, find out what's going on, what we've been up to. But ultimately, if we're really lucky, we've got a great team. We can trust them just to get on with it. Funny enough, because we've expanded so much in the last 2 or 3 years, we've had a backlog of administration to catch up on.
Okay, yeah.
And we always said, it'd be great if we could shut the business for a couple of months, just to catch up on everything. Didn't quite think it would be in this form. So in many ways, we've had to say, okay, this is not ideal, but it's a great opportunity to do all those things that you've been putting off. Everything is important. It's just some things are more important than other things, and inevitably things fall to the pile. So the team's been great at getting all those things sorted out. I think everyone's enjoyed having the freedom just to really get on with their job and get up to speed with everything, knowing that at some point, in July, August, September, we'll all be back raring to go again, hopefully restaurants open again. Mm-hmm. So we took the view, we just want to make sure when we come back, we're on the front foot. I've got to make sure we've got the new list ready to go, which obviously can be a bit bigger than it was going to be. Now we've got domain direct. And that, everything has been shipped, all the stock is in order, everything. So yeah, a bit like in an orchestra, you trust your violinist to play their part in the concerto, and you trust the man on the cymbals to sort of bang his cymbals at the right time.
That's a nice way to get it.
I'm delighted to say that they've all been doing that, and we've had the odd team catch up just to share a bit of news or have a drink at the end of the week, and that's been great. So no, I mean we're really lucky. We've got a really good team. We did furlough a couple of people who are predominantly selling to restaurants. I think that's been a really helpful scheme. But as much as possible, we tried to keep everyone in the business where there was work to be done.
Brilliant.
As I say, if things get back to normal quickly, then everyone will come back and we can carry on, hopefully, with more vigour than before. That's the aim, anyway.
Yeah, great. Well, really nice talking to you. I mean, just a final thought then. I mean, obviously, you've spelt out how you've sort of worked through the process of lockdown. I mean, looking on this time next year, how do you see the trade overall? Is it positive, optimistic, or how are you?
Well, funny enough, I mean, Jason Atherton summed something up very nice the other day about what a great industry it was. And we've seen great examples of people helping others outside of the industry, supporting people within the industry. So I think that's been great. I would add to that, I think we're really fortunate that we work in an industry that involves two things people will always either want or need, and that is food and drink.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't necessarily want to be, I don't know, selling washing machines or in the car industry at the moment. I think there are some industries that going to really struggle to get back on their feet. But food and wine industry, I think, is there's a lot of passion for it. And as I say, as long as we can adapt, make people feel safe and confident. In restaurants, they'll come back to restaurants. Say shops, I think shops will thrive even more now because they've got both ways of operating.
Yeah.
So the new way, which has been fantastic, plus the old, people will still want to go and browse and buy bottles.
Yeah.
But the new modern approach of having things delivered, interacting, all the webinar tastings that have been going on, I think they're here to stay. It just adds an extra element. So, I mean, potentially, not in the very short term, but in the longer term, things could be even better than they were before. I think the landscape will change. I don't think it'll necessarily be the same companies around in a couple of years' time. We may see a few mergers. That's quite possible, where people need to consolidate. But I tend to be fairly optimistic about these things anyway, and I think companies that were doing the right things anyway will probably adapt and potentially flourish. Actually,
great. Well, I think on that note, we'll say thank you very much indeed. I mean, you look like you are very much well placed, and yeah, wish you and the rest of your team well. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Richard.
Cheers. All right.